Nearly everywhere in the world, you'll find pockets of people who chose to relocate to other areas together, finding themselves clustered in their own little communities. Little Italies, Chinatowns, Germantowns are all peppered around the world. There's safety in numbers, familiarity, and allows traditions to carry on away from their homeland. Some traditions and beliefs, though, are best left to die. All cult stories seem to have the same thematic progression. A charismatic religious leader establishes a set of beliefs and practices, obtains followers through a promise of a better life, a better path to salvation, and a sense of community. They might go off and live on their own in a commune. There may be some other sinister acts taking place under the covers. There may be sexual abuse. There may even be murder. But what makes Colonia Dignidad different from other cults is that this cult was run by Nazis, and it answered to no one. May 8th, 1945.
General Eisenhower informs me that the forces of Germany have surrendered to the United Nations.
The day that World War II, after about 6 long, tiresome, and brutal years, at least on the European front, came to an end. The Germans had surrendered, and suddenly the German people, who might have thought themselves to be invincible with the protection and shroud of the Nazi flag, were in a state of chaos. Germany, like much of Europe, was under a gray cloud of smoke, cities wiped out by heavy bombing, so that all that remained were piles of rubble and ash. Germans suffered heavy losses from the war, not just in lives, but in industrial power as well. It's estimated that 6.9 to 7.5 million Germans were killed, close to 9% of their population, and agriculture production was 35% of what it was prior to the war. The Allies also suffered millions of lives defending the world against Nazi fascism and the maniacal dictatorship of Adolf Hitler. And after the war, the next task facing the Allies would be the denazification of Germany. Germany was subsequently divided into Eastern and Western Germany, with heavy influence and control from the Soviet Union in the East and the United States in the West. It wasn't as though on May 8, 1945, the Nazis and Nazi supporters suddenly realized how wrong their actions were, and were instantly rehabilitated into society, no longer thinking they were the Aryan superior race. This wasn't day one of sobriety, earning a chip for all of the sudden not being a Nazi. After the war, many continued to favor and support the Nazi doctrine of beliefs, but it was riskier to say so, with trials for Nazi war crimes underway.
Wilhelm Keidel, Ernst Kaltenbrunner, Alfred Jodl, Martin Bormann.
There was always the risk of getting caught, sure. But the sad reality is that only 161 Nazis were convicted of crimes against humanity in the Nuremberg trials, and only around 20,000 Nazis were ever found guilty of crimes at all, with fewer than 600 Nazis in total who received heavy sentences of multi-year prison sentences or even death. That's a far cry from the estimated 200,000 to up to the near 1 million Nazis estimated to have actively participated in killing 6 million Jews in the Holocaust. So, the ones who were at risk of possible prosecution, it should come as no surprise that many Germans and ex-Nazis fled Germany and Europe altogether. Perhaps I should use the term Nazi rather than ex-Nazi, though, because once you are one, can your hands ever be washed of the blood of millions of innocent lives and indoctrinated hate? It makes me think of the end of the movie Inglourious Bastards, when Lieutenant Aldo Rain talks about he'd have a Nazi, quote, wear that goddamn uniform for the rest of their lives, to show everyone who they really are.
I mean, if I had my way, you'd wear that goddamn uniform for the rest of your pecker-sucking life. I'm aware it ain't practical. I mean, at some point you gotta have to take it off. So, I'm gonna give you a little something you can't take off.
Lieutenant Aldo Rain had another technique for branding a Nazi, though. But in real life, those Nazis and members of the SS could just peel off those uniforms and run and hide and even blend in with society. Their new friends and neighbors would be none the wiser. But where did all of these Nazis go? Sure, some stayed in Germany and quietly reintegrated into society as Germany was denazified, even though Nazis and SS lived among one another, a community still. Some truly were mortified of their actions and participation in mass murder. But the other sad part of the story is that Nazis were able to find refuge all over the world in the arms of fascist-friendly, dictated lands. Italy was a member of the Axis powers, and Spain, though declaring itself neutral during World War II because it was still reeling after a brutal civil war between 1936 and 1939, was definitely more friend than foe to Germany. Both countries provided a way for Nazis to flee Europe. Spain and Italy's coasts created a route, known as rat lines, for Nazis and SS to flee. Even several high-ranking Catholic Church officials in Italy, France, and Spain helped Nazis flee by helping them obtain passports issued by the Red Cross with false names. South America offered the only true salvation for these criminals and collaborators and made fine destination locales for Nazis. They found familiarity in military dictatorships. It was far, far away from the rest of Europe and colonies of other allies. And of course, there was the money. Millions and millions of dollars pillaged by the Nazis in Europe were sent to support the governments in South America by investing in corporations and shell companies too. As many as 9,000 Nazi officers and collaborators escaped Europe and possible prosecution, finding refuge in South America. Shortly after the war, Brazil took in between 1,500 and 2,000, Chile 500 to 1,000, and as many as 5,000 Nazis and SS officers relocated to Argentina into the open arms of dictator Juan Perón. After Perón's fall from power in 1955, many Nazis that had settled into Argentina crossed the border into Chile. In fact, some of the most notorious Nazis of all time found a haven in various parts of South America, including Joseph Mengele, the Angel of Death who found sadistic pleasure from experimenting on Jews in Auschwitz, Adolf Eichmann, one of the central organizers of the Holocaust, Walter Rauch, who invented a mobile gas chamber, and Erich Priebke, who commanded a unit that massacred hundreds of civilians in Italy. The figure central to the cult of Colonia Dignidad, however, wasn't necessarily known for his crimes during the war, but the horrifying crimes committed in the shadows of the foothills of the Andes Mountains, all while keeping his Nazi friends close. All cults begin, and usually also end, with its founding leader. Paul Shafer is the origin story of Colonia Dignidad, and all of the shocking terrors that lie beneath. Decades of abuse, torture, and murder all held within this commune, built like a fortress. Paul Shafer and his flock of 300 settled in the remote, mountainous area of Chile, creating a community that would be known as Colonia Dignidad, the Dignity Colony. Like many cults, it began with a promise of living off the land and being closer to nature, and far from the potential convictions of Nazi crimes. For Paul Shafer, Colonia Dignidad became a pedophile's paradise. Born December 4th, 1921 in Germany, Paul Shafer Schneider served as a medic in the Nazi forces. In the years immediately following the war, Paul stayed in Germany, channeling himself into religion and became a youth leader in the Evangelical Free Church, but was reportedly removed from his post amid allegations of molestation of young boys. By the early 1950s, Shafer discovered the teachings of American preacher William M. Branham, who was a post-World War II revivalist and also known to be a heavy influence on Jim Jones.
You believe with all your heart, and if God will just reveal to me what is wrong with you, will you accept him as...
Branham's teachings advocated a strict adherence to the Bible, a woman's duty to obey her husband, and of course, the coming apocalypse. The latter rain movement, as it was called, began by Branham, believes in the serpent seed doctrine, according to which Eve had sexual relations with the snake in the Garden of Eden. This certainly helps reinforce the idea that women should be forced into subordinate and submissive roles, and separated from males so as not to tempt them with their sexual desire. Inspired by Branham, Shafer set up his own ministry, whose early followers became the war widows and their children from the Soviet-occupied East Germany. After the war, many Germans were seeking moral solace from the atrocities of the war through religion. Shafer capitalized on this need and created a charity organization for young boys as a way to get closer to children for his own sexual desires. In 1959, the same year that he created the organization, 2 mothers came forward with accusations that Shafer had molested their sons, and Shafer was charged with abusing 2 young boys. Shafer fled to avoid the warrant for his arrest when he came into contact with the Chilean ambassador to Germany, who invited Shafer and his flock to Chile. In 1961, President Jorge Alessandri granted Shafer permission to create Dignidad Benefit Society on a farm, and Shafer purchased 4,400 acres, where he and his first 10 of his followers began to build and prepare for the rest of his congregation to join him. He managed to persuade the others to join him by instilling a fear that communism might overtake Germany. But the real reason that Paul was able to find asylum in Chile was because he struck a deal with the Chilean government. Shafer and his community would be exempt from paying taxes and would be granted asylum, so long as he helped the government gain political intelligence on its people. Shafer's relationship with the government in Chile would intertwine even further in just a few years after the colony's inception. By 1963, 230 members of his congregation from Germany made their way to Chile, with another 15 families making the journey in 1966 and 1973, and the colony was complete. 60 years later, evidence of the extensive preparations Shafer made for his colony remains, although the outside world may never know the full extent of the secrets hidden among layers of concrete, barbed wire, and intricate security systems more sophisticated than surely any other cult in the world has ever seen. What was Paul Shafer really hiding in rural Chile? Why would a religious cult need to be equipped with security systems, bunker systems, watchtowers, and ammunition centers? Could Colonia Dignidad be more than a haven for his own personal abuse?